headphones at all.
Oh, no.
Somebody completely took them out of the studio. So that's truly my pet peeve. Like, that is like really my pet peeve.
That's annoying.
That
Those aren't yours, are they?
No, neither one of them. They are my personal headphones, and they've been taken out of the room. So there you go.
So drive safe.
Drive safe and
leave stuff that's not yours alone.
Exactly. If it's not yours, do not, damn it, touch it. Okay? Leave it where it is. All right? Man, my mom taught me, the parents told me that a long time ago. If it ain't yours, don't touch it unless you ask the person. So
leave a place better than you found it.
Absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
Dang. I'm sorry, D-Mase. We'll find him.
No worries. But
we're going to be on a wild goose chase trying to find your headphones.
Exactly. Absolutely. So, but other than that, let's get into some sports. Preds had a great win last night.
Yeah, fun ending. My
man,
goodness.
The part about it is I didn't get a chance to see the ending. So
that was the best part.
I know it was the best part.
35 seconds of really fun hockey.
I know.
To go along with,
and I heard chasing them
period.
Talking about situations like that, leaving an event early and regretting that you didn't stay for the duration of it because something at times happens that, you're like, man, God. So that's one of those.
That ever happened to you, D-Mase?
I should have just watched the whole game. Huh?
That ever happened to you? Leave something early? Just like, man, I wish I would stayed.
No, not really, because, to me, I don't go to many sporting events other than, Titans, Preds. But outside of that, I may get to, if I, like a Laker game, because my son loves the Lakers. So we'll go to a Laker game, but I'm staying that whole game unless it's a blowout. But I don't think I've left too many places. Well, I don't think I left any place and said, man, I should have stayed.
Yeah.
Especially not over at Nissan Stadium because that traffic is heavy. I try to get out of there as early as possible.
Even if you miss a game winner, it's like, yeah, well,
I
got out in time.
Exactly.
Yeah. I hope everyone in the stadium had a great time, but I had a very easy drive home.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's get into it. Again, we'll chat with Tim Hasselbeck in 1 hour, so I'm interested to hear Tim Hasselbeck's thoughts about this. But there was an article put out on ESPN.com. Bill Barnwell broke down 7 coaches, and 7 NFL coaches that could be on the hot seat, that might be on the hot seat, who made matters worse for themselves, who maybe hurt their job security this past weekend. So when I saw the headline, I wasn't thinking, is Mike Vrabel on this list? I'm thinking, where is Mike Vrabel on this list? And of course, Mike Vrabel was on this list of hot seat coaches that made matters worse for themselves. I mean, 34-14 loss on the road at Jacksonville when it really, you weren't in the game in the slightest. And the only one of the only touchdowns you could score this entire season on the road is a trick play to the defensive tackle. But Bill Barnwell breaks down exactly why Mike Vrabel is on the hot seat, what has gone down in really the last calendar year. Think back to this time last year. The Titans go on the road at Lambeau on Thursday Night Football, even though that was a Packers team with an Aaron Rodgers that didn't really look like peak Aaron Rodgers. The Titans looked great. It was the best offensive game that Todd Downing had called as the Titans offensive coordinator. The Titans haven't won a road game since. Todd Downing was arrested that night.
Yeah,
John Robinson was fired just a couple of weeks later. A lot went down. So we are a far cry. This team is a far cry from that Thursday night in Green Bay. So Bill Barnwell just kind of highlights all of that and talks about how, Vrabel, if Vrabel wants to get away from the Tennessee Titans, writes, New England is far-fetched, but Vrabel is still regarded around the league as an excellent coach, albeit with diminished results over the past 2 seasons. I'm inclined to agree. This is Bill Barnwell speaking. Firing Vrabel would be a major misstep for this organization, but losing wears on the owners. If the Titans and GM Rand Carthon think that it's time to start over, that could include a new coaching staff. So Bill Barnwell writes, I'm inclined to agree that he's an excellent coach, and firing Vrabel would be a major misstep for this organization. Do you agree?
I think this is the problem that some people run into. The apprehension on being apprehensible moving forward. Like, I don't want to because this coach, and if I, allow him to get out the building, or if I fire him, he's going to be hired right away, and he's going to start doing well with that, with the other team. And all of that could be true, but you can't base your decisions on that solely, because there are coaches that coaches at one team or university, and it may start off well, but then ends up plateauing or falling off the cliff or whatnot. But then they go somewhere else, and they have a good team. They do a good job at that next stop. So he can, theoretically, leave here and go somewhere else and do a good job. And I would bet a lot of money that if he did leave here, he would go wherever he's going, he would do a good job. But I think sometimes in situations like this, it's not that you're not a good coach. It's just things are changing, and you may not be the best coach for this team at this particular time. You are the coach, the right coach at that particular time in 2018 when he took the job. Why? Because this team had started building this team back up. And Mike Mularkey did a really good job at putting this roster together, making it a playoff team.
And they went to the playoffs,
won a game. Mm-hmm. Year before that, they had a winning record, I believe. So you took hold of a team, a young team with some really good players, and you helped develop them even further. So you had a good group of guys to work with, and you came in at the best time, and you were able to coach these guys. But as these guys started to get a little older, things started to happen. You started to bring in your guys or whatnot. Maybe it just changed a little. Mm-hmm. Again, not saying that you're not a good coach, but maybe the message is hitting a little bit different. It doesn't hit the way it did when you first took the job in 18, 19, 20, 21. Now it's hitting a little bit different, and you're not getting the results that you want based upon the message that you're preaching. You got it in those 3 or 4 years prior,
right,
but maybe now the message is just not hitting home. It's not hitting the right individuals that you want it to hit.
Good coaches fail sometimes
they do
in this league. Look at Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls. And ever since Tom Brady left, they have yet to win a playoff game.
Andy Reid in Philadelphia. He took his team to Super Bowls, NFC Championship games. And eventually, his time came where he had to go somewhere else.
And he went somewhere else and has had and is having a whole heck of a lot of success.
Exactly.
But I don't think that Philadelphia is in a situation right now where they're thinking, dang, wish we had Andy Reid. Because they were right alongside Andy Reid in that Super Bowl. So,
and they've won a Super Bowl since Andy Reid left.
Exactly. So good coaches sometimes fail in this league, and good coaches get fired in this league. Bill Belichick probably will get fired in New England. Bill Belichick's probably the greatest coach in the history of the National Football League. And I'm not saying that to say that I think Vrabel should be fired today. But it seems to me that there is this national media perception of Mike Vrabel that he is omnipotent, that he is untouchable, that he is such a fantastic coach that the Tennessee Titans cannot be anything or have not been anything after him or before him. Bill Barnwell talks about how he's regarded around the league as an excellent coach. And I do think that Mike Vrabel is a good coach. But you're 3-14 in your last 17 games. At what point do we start to question this reputation that Mike Vrabel has around the league as an excellent coach? Because like I said, excellent coaches, good coaches, they fail sometimes in this league. But that doesn't mean that you hold on to them and you put all of your eggs into a basket that's just simply not working. 3-14 in your last 17. It's not working.
Yeah, it's not. See, I mean, again, this is, he did a wonderful job, prior to the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And I always go back to, okay, what has made him an excellent coach in the eyes of the people outside of Nashville? Obviously, we know why we like him here in Nashville, or to some people why they used to like him prior to the middle of last season and in this season. But if you deemed him a great coach because he took and this was always the thing with Mike Vrabel and those outside looking in. Look at what he's doing with that roster. That's not a roster full of all-pro and this and that. And look, guys are getting injured. And look how he continues to galvanize his group, and they continue to win games.
Which I think was very impressive.
It was. But here's the deal. So when it doesn't happen, aren't you supposed to put the blame on the coach as well? Because you gave him all this praise for taking a roster, especially when the roster started getting depleted with injuries. But, oh no, Mike Vrabel, look at what he's doing. He's got this team winning. He's the greatest coach, NFL Coach of the Year. He's in the same situation now. A roster that is not as good, but he hasn't been able to take this roster and make it anything but a, 3-7 team. But people are not blaming that on him. People are blaming it on, it's John Robinson's fault. Now it's Rand Carthon's fault. This guy can't play. But John was the GM when y'all were saying, he's taking this roster of mediocrity and he's making them great. You can't have it both ways. You just can't. At least not in my eyes.
Can we stop as a Titans fan society? Can we stop talking about John Robinson?
Yeah, it's over with.
You can't refire him.
Exactly. Stop it, people.
And also, if we want to talk about John Robinson, I don't think it's a coincidence that this team's best years happened when John Robinson was the general manager.
Yeah, so as much flack as y'all give John Robinson, you might want to give him because if you believe that John Robinson was in charge of personnel, well, he brought on some really good players.
Yeah.
He had his misses, I give you that.
Oh, yeah.
But he also had his hits.
Because if we're going to talk about that 2021 year, where the Titans were the most injured team in the league, yet still were the number one seed in the AFC, we should give Mike Vrabel credit for that. Absolutely, because that's the reason why he was NFL Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
Top seed in the AFC. They had a path to the Super Bowl had Ryan Tannehill not thrown in 3 interceptions. But let's give John Robinson credit for that, too. Because John Robinson went window shopping across practice squads across the league. And he was the one that put those players on this roster. Credit to Vrabel for coaching them up. But John Robinson was the one that brought them in. Now, look, John Robinson missed on some drafts. The 2021 draft, really, in its entirety, isn't doing anything for this football team.
That was a dud draft.
A dud of a draft. And you drafted 2 tackles in back-to-back drafts with high draft positions. Isaiah Wilson in the first round in 2020 and Dylan Radins in the second round in 2021, and neither of those 2 worked out. Isaiah Wilson didn't work out a little bit more than Dylan Radins isn't working out. But I don't want to talk about John Robinson anymore. He got fired.
Yes.
He's not the one that brought in Andre Dillard. He's not the reason why this defense is struggling. He is not the reason why Treylon Burks isn't what you expected Treylon Burks to be. This offensive line, I believe, is probably the top problem with this team. That's not John Robinson's fault.
No, it's not. You can't continue because again, you're just making excuses for the individual that is in charge. So we think that's in charge of most of the personnel. You're giving him a pass because everything that is happening now, that happened last year, everybody goes and point at John Robinson. Well, again, John isn't part of this team moving forward. The guys that John went out and got, y'all won with. You went to an AFC championship game. You had the number 1 seed in the NFL in the AFC. You were a good team. And now all of a sudden, you didn't sign guys back. You allowed to, whether it was John Robinson's deal or not, A.J. Brown gets out of the building. This roster moving forward, starting at the beginning of last year, offseason, had nothing to do with John Robinson. The guys that you brought in, because the guys that you brought in essentially was replacement for the guys that John Robinson drafted, Long Jr., guys like that were productive in this defense or productive for this team. And because of their injury history, You chose not to sign them back. You called them repeat offenders. Well, damn it, those repeat offenders went somewhere else, and they ain't offending over and over again. They're on the field and they're playing. So to me, this team this year is a product of what you went out and got this offseason. Because the guys that you relied on this season are not doing the job that you want them to do.
Right.
And you can't put that on John Robinson. John Robinson had nothing to do with that.
John Robinson whiffed on some picks and maybe on some decisions, but what you do as an NFL organization, every single general manager whiffs.
Exactly.
I think Howie Roseman might be one of the best general managers in the National Football League in Philadelphia. He whiffed on Andre Dillard. That was the Eagles' first-round pick.
Yeah.
But now the Eagles have probably the best offensive line in the NFL, if not a top 3 offensive line in the NFL, because when you whiff on a player, you go out and you find another one. You either draft them or you pick them up in free agency. You find a way to address that problem. This Titans team hasn't done that yet. Because, whiffing on Isaiah Wilson, absolutely that hurts. Because he could really use a tackle right now. But that was 3 years ago. You got to address that at some point. You can't always be thinking about, 3 or 4 years ago we whiffed on that player. No, you have to replace those players. You have to keep trying to find that piece that makes your team a better football team. So right now, I'm done talking about John Robinson. Does he have his missteps? Totally. So does every general manager in the league. Now the question is, do we trust Mike Vrabel to get that team there? Do we trust Mike Vrabel to rebuild this team from what it is now back to maybe what it was in 19, 20, and 21, and even beyond that, to be able to be competitive in the AFC?
I mean, that's a question that Amy is going to have to answer, moving forward. Because even when John took the job, I think there were, you had cornerstone players in place, at least, well, you had 2 of them. You had Derrick Henry, because I don't think Derrick Henry was a John Robinson draft. You had Taylor Lewan, who wasn't a part of John Robinson's drafting. So you had some guys that you relied on heavy for this organization. And so you had pieces in place when John took the job. John enhanced that. He drafted more guys, Kevin Byard, other guys, A.J. Brown, that also helped elevate this team. Now that his players, for the most part, are gone, they are all, with the exception of Derrick Henry.
John Robinson did draft Derrick Henry. That was his first draft.
That was his first draft. Okay,
Yeah.
so Taylor Lewan and the guys before that 17 year, which was it Jack Conklin? It might have been Conklin. No, because Conklin was after, because they drafted
Corey Davis?
It might have been Corey
That was the
Davis.
16.
Yeah, so it was Corey
Yeah, so
Davis
Corey
and
Davis.
Taylor Lewan. 2 guys that were, for the most part, cornerstones of what you were doing as a young team. So you had some young pieces. And then John came in and added to those young pieces that were already there, which ended up allowing you, starting with Malarkey that 1 year, and now Mike Vrabel allowed you to put a team on the field that was competitive and that ultimately became the best team in the AFC. I'm only basing it upon record, not necessarily upon who won the Super Bowl, because that year, 2 years ago, they were the number 1 team in the National Football League, at least in the AFC, and they had the number 1 seed. So John helped you form a team that was the number 1 seed in the National Football League in regards to the AFC. Hell, I think they might have been the number 1 seed overall, period, if I'm not mistaken, that year, the 21 year.
Number 1 team in the AFC.
I know they were the number 1 AFC. I'm saying who was, because they had only lost, 3 games that year? No, they weren't.
No, they lost.
They were 12-4. Yeah, they were
4.
12-4. So I'm trying to figure out who in the NFC was.
Or did they lose 5? Were they 12-5 that season? Because that was the 17-game season.
So that was 17. So
They
you're
would be
right.
12
they were
and
12 and 5. So I'm trying to figure out in the NFC who had a better record. But anyway, he helped you form a team that was the number 1 seed in the AFC. and then all of a sudden he gets fired. And now, again, people want to blame it, on John Robinson. But isn't he the same GM that went out and got the players and helped draft the players that make you a number one seed in the AFC? You can't blame him for what's happening now.
No, because under John Robinson, the Titans never had a losing season.
No, they didn't. They won 60% of their games under him. They were in one AFC championship. They were the number one seed once. They made it to, I think they got second. Well, I guess that's the same year. Got the second round. So this team had some success under John Robinson. And I'm not gonna say it's ironic, but it is ironic that when he leaves, this is where this team is at. And it started last season when the owner chose to fire him in the middle of the season.
And you're not going to get John Robinson back.
No, you're not.
And now that's the biggest question of how does this team get back to that point where they were? Because it's really hard to dig yourself out of a hole that the Titans find themselves in now. So what gives us confidence that Mike Vrabel can do that? We'll get into that coming up next. We'll get into your thoughts as well. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Caroline, Willy, and D-Mase. We're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
Do you think your job security is an issue, Mike, or going to be?
Oh, Paul, I don't try to concern myself with that. I really am focused on these players. I hurt for them. I played 14 years, won some games, won some championships. I am frustrated for the players. I'm disappointed for the players. I want them to have success. I know how hard they work and that they put into it. So that's what my focus is. My focus is on coaching this team, of trying to get these guys to understand that there's a fine line in this league of winning and losing, and finding a way to get a win. That's what I'm focused on. I'll let you guys, fire me each week or not fire me. I apologize. I appreciate your question. I do. I will always understand that. We have to improve and we have to win. Those are things that we have to do.
You think Vrabel's feeling it, D-Mase?
Oh, yeah. He's feeling it, but he's trying not to think about it. And I get it.
You can't let it get to you. You can't let it seep into your every single thought. And I was talking to Joe and Robbie this morning. I hop on their show every Tuesday at 7 a.m. And they asked me, is he feeling it? I said, I think the way that he responded to Paul Kuharsky, when most of Paul Kuharsky's questions are met with frustration and sass and a little bit of sarcasm, and Vrabel saying, I appreciate your question, Paul, and I apologize for interrupting you. I said, by the end of the season, Mike Vrabel's going to be saying, you know what, Jared, I want to think more like you. He's going to say, Joe, I love the way that you move your hands. Just feeling it, but it's going to be a little bit nicer. But so Bill Barnwell broke down in an article 7 NFL head coaches that are on the hot seat and possibly made their situations worse this past weekend. Brandon Staley is one of those names that he mentions. Matt Canada, Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator, who actually just got fired this morning, is on this list. Mike Vrabel is on this list as well. But what we're discussing is this portion of Bill Barnwell's article when talking about Mike Vrabel, is saying he's still regarded around the league as an excellent coach, albeit with diminished results over the past 2 seasons. Firing Vrabel would be a major misstep for this organization, but losing wears on owners, which is true. But my question is, couldn't it also be a major misstep if this organization decides to hold on to Mike Vrabel? Because what gives us, and that's a question for you, D-Mase, that I'm asking myself and for all of Titans fans and our callers, our texters, our listeners, of what gives you confidence that Vrabel can turn this ship around, both in a personnel way, a talent evaluation way, now that Mike Vrabel has a larger role in talent evaluations and in roster decisions, and as a head coach?
What gives me the confidence? I think Mike is good at his job. I can't say neither, I don't have confidence in him or, what gives me confidence because, he didn't have the same responsibilities that many believe he has now, which means he has a say or he has more of a say in personnel. Previously we thought we believed it just to be John. Now, it seems or it feels as if he has more of a say on who comes in, who leaves, when it comes to players. So I don't think there's been a long enough track record to say, do I have confidence in him or not? It's because that's a hard question to answer. It truly is because, I can say, no, I don't have confidence in him based upon what has happened this year, with the guys that they went out and got, starting with Dillard and some other guys. And it hadn't quite worked out the way that they thought it would. So do I all of a sudden say, you know what, just because of this 1 year or one off season, I have no more faith in, what Mike Vrabel can do from a personnel standpoint? I think this year, and we talked about this months ago, I think, when Rand Carthon first took the job, I thought this upcoming offseason would be the most important offseason for this team because it gives both the coach and the GM a full year to be together to evaluate the roster, and then knowing what they need and how do they proceed in getting those things that they need or those players that they need. So I think after, and maybe he's here, maybe he's not, I don't know. But I think next year is the year that I would feel comfortable with answering that question, because you and Rand went through a whole season together. Off season, y'all knew exactly what y'all needed to address, and then y'all went out and got those players that y'all needed, and it either works or it doesn't. That's when I would be in a better position to answer that question.
More of a sample size.
Exactly. Yeah. The sample size is a little bit too small, but fans, you got fans that don't trust him, and I get it. I understand it. But for me, the sample size where he and Rand together is not big enough for me to determine whether I believe Mike can go out and get the talent and then coach the talent up.
And the tricky thing here, too, is in the NFL, you don't get a lot of time.
No.
That maybe taking your time to evaluate, it could be too late and you dig yourself in a deeper hole. Mm-hmm. But we mentioned in that Bill Barnwell article, and just overall based off of Mike Vrabel's reputation around the league, he has a sterling reputation. Everyone thinks that he's a great coach. And I think they have so much belief in Mike Vrabel because of what he did in his first few seasons with the Tennessee Titans. You saw what he did in 2021 when the Titans were the most injured team in the league, and they still had the top seed in the AFC, where the Titans really, for the most part, with in the Marcus era, were a average team at best. And now all of a sudden, with Tannehill and Vrabel, this is a playoff team. Like, this is a Super Bowl contending team. I think everyone, at least on the outside, looks at that and says, man, that Mike Vrabel is a great coach. But this is a what have you done for me lately league. And right now, over the last 17 games going into last season, the Titans have won 3 of them. Right now, the off-season decisions that Mike Vrabel made in tandem with Rand Carthon have not made this team better. In fact, this team has only gotten worse. There are several players on this team that I look to be future core members of the team that haven't gotten better. In fact, maybe have even gotten worse. Nicholas Petit-Frere, Chigakonkwo, Traylon Burks. Peter Skoronski, I don't think has gotten better this season. This offensive line has not gotten better this season. The decision to promote the assistant offensive line coach from last season to offensive line coach, bad decision. And you're starting to see the effects of that now with such a horrendous offensive line that got your starting quarterback hurt and is probably going to get your, knock on wood, your rookie quarterback hurt. And I'll give Mike Vrabel credit for some coaching decisions that he's made. Naming Arthur Smith offensive coordinator, bringing in Jim Schwartz, those did good things for this team. But without Jim Schwartz, this defense is struggling. Was Shane Bowen the right hire at the time? Is Shane Bowen the right guy for the job now? Mike Vrabel told us yesterday he doesn't intend to make any coaching changes. And I don't expect Mike Vrabel to go up to the podium and say, here's who I'm going to fire at the end of the season. But he did seem very headstrong in holding on to this coaching staff. The what have you done for me lately, the product that we've seen on the field, the fact that this team did not get better in the offseason, those are all reasons that don't give me confidence that Mike Vrabel can turn things around.
Yeah, and I can understand that. That's why, again, I think this offseason is going to be a critical one for both Rand Carthon and Mike Vrabel, but I think most importantly for Mike Vrabel. He's going to have to the relationship that he and Rand has in regards to players that they go out and scout and evaluate, they're going to have to hit. There can't be any, to me, because of where the Titans are at, you can't have too many misses. You got to, in doing your evaluation, not just in the draft, but in free agency also. Yeah. Now, the free agency part is a little tricky because how much money can we spend? Can we spend the money that we need to spend to go out and get the players we need to go out and get?
And the Amy side of this is kind of a wild card factor.
Exactly.
Because
Absolutely.
We're not going to know how deep her checkbook's going to look this offseason. The cap and cash are two very different things.
Exactly. So when it comes to free agency, that's going to be a little tricky. Now, as far as the draft, listen, y'all got to prove that y'all can go out and evaluate, which I believe they can. I believe Rand can do his job and do it very well. I don't understand why people are upset at Rand Carthon so early in the process. It hadn't even really been a full calendar year, I don't believe. No, it hasn't been.
No.
But yet and still some people are questioning, him as a GM. I have
no
idea
when
why.
a team is this bad as they are, I think it's fair to question everybody.
Yeah, it is, but some people, I think you can't truly. Again, it's like a college coach. I always say, and I do believe, you got to give a college coach at least one cycle, like recruiting cycle, to really know if he's the guy, because essentially he's working with the prior coaches, recruits.
Right.
So give him an opportunity to recruit a year, watch his players develop, and then you can make your decision based upon that.
That still does not stop athletic directors from firing those coaches.
I know it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I think some universities do operate that way. And I think some coaching, like some organizations, some teams operate in that manner. Like, listen, if you've taken hold of a bad team, I need to give you some time to go out and get the personnel, because this is not college where I can recruit, 10 5-stars this year and then turn right back around and recruit 10 more.
Not very many people can do that.
Yeah, you're right. Let's say 5.
Saban and Kirby can do that.
They can do that.
Nobody else.
Let's just say 5. 4. Let's say 4 5-star guys. You go out and recruit them, or 4 5-star girl basketball players or whatnot. But you get an opportunity the next year to double down with another 3 or 4. So it keeps your program typically on a high, because you're able to go out. If you develop those players right, you're able to go out and stack your roster. Well, in the NFL, you can't do that. Yeah. Why? Collective bargaining and all this other stuff, contracts and everything else. So you can't replenish with top-notch guys every year. But you're going to have to, this offseason, go out and address free agency with a concerted concentration, or there has to be this, like, this is what we're doing.
A focus on what you want to be.
Yes, a focus on what the guys that we are identifying in free agency that we want to bring on this team. We need to identify them right away and make a hard, like a serious push. Not we only want guys that want to play for us, and this is what no.
And not we'll take a player off of this team's practice squad, or a second string, a backup here and there, just to see, maybe hopefully they'll work out and we can get them on a bargain. No, proven players, because doing that, making that gamble, hoping that you can find a diamond in the rough, is what got you Andre Dillard.
Exactly. But my thing is, again, if you show guys the money, top-tier guys, they're going to want to play for you.
Yeah.
Because they're getting that paycheck.
Why do you think DeAndre Hopkins is here?
Exactly. DeAndre Hopkins
is here. Because he likes hot chicken?
No, because you gave him the money that he was asking for, and it didn't help. It didn't hurt that Tim Kelly was the offensive coordinator, and he has a relationship with Tim Kelly.
Right.
But first and foremost, you showed him the money. If you would have came to the table and said, we can only give you $7 million, he would have looked at you like you had 3 heads and went somewhere else. But first, you showed him the money. Yeah, you brought him here, showed him around Nashville. Nashville is wonderful, and you showed him the facilities, and that's wonderful. But it came down to the dollars and cents. Does the dollars make sense for a D-Hop? It did. And it didn't hurt again that you had Tim Kelly. So you're going to have to make a concerted effort, a focused effort to identify guys that you want in free agency. That's what's going to help expedite sort of this trend from being a bad team to a good team.
Let's get some of your thoughts on this. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Jonathan is on the line with a thought on his confidence in Vrabel. What's up, Jonathan?
Hey, thank you for taking my call. Firstly, Derek Mason, you're one of the greatest Titans receivers ever. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Now, let's think about the coaching staff. I know we're talking about the personnel as far as who to get in free agency, who to draft, and all that. But when Vrabel was successful in his early years as a Titans coach, Arthur Smith was offensive coordinator. Dean Pease, defensive. Even when they left, you had what's the guy? Jim Schwartz was helping out on the defense. Mm-hmm. He's not there. He's not there anymore. What is Vrabel's coaching looking like when they're gone? Don't look so good with these in-house hires that they keep doing. So I think if you do bring in better players, the coaching staff still sucks. What do you think about that? I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you for your call, Jonathan. That was one thing that we talked about yesterday. Is I said if I'm Amy Adams drunk, I'm sitting down and I'm having a very serious conversation with Mike Vrabel and saying, what are you going to do to fix this? Because even if, let's say, Shane Bowen's not the problem with the defense, you still have to show some sort of accountability. And you still have to show we're doing whatever it takes to help make this team better. So you're going to have to find a defensive coordinator that you did not promote from within. You're going to have to go out and find an offensive line coach that you did not promote from the last offensive line coach that wasn't good enough so that you fired him. You're going to have to go out a little bit out of your comfort zone. No more of hiring your buddies and promoting from within, because that just hasn't been working.
Well, I mean,
other than Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a different story.
But Arthur was here before Vrabel got
right.
here. Arthur had worked his way, through the ranks, and, he was deserving of an opportunity to prove that he can be an offensive coordinator in this league, and he did. I think this is what is getting the fans upset. Yes, the players, we understand that, but I think the in-house hires that haven't worked out, most importantly, the offensive line, which is struggling because of the personnel and maybe the position coach, and then now the defense. They struggled before Jim Schwartz came into the picture. Those 2 years, they were great. Now Jim Schwartz is not in the picture. I'm not going to say it was Jim Schwartz, but man, oh man, it does look like Jim Schwartz, doesn't it?
It doesn't feel like it's rocket science to figure out
saying.
The difference between those two defenses. But let's get right back into your phones after this. 615-737-1025. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Tune in to 93.3 Classic Hits tonight for MTSU men's basketball. The Blue Raiders take on UAB tonight at home. Tip-off is at 6:30 p.m. with the pregame beginning at 6 p.m. Coverage also available on the 93.3 Classic app and at 93.3classichits.com.
Hey, Nashville. You've heard me talk the last couple of months about Zen Sports, the new sports betting app exclusively in Tennessee. And now I'm excited to share with you some big news. Now, when you sign up for a Zen Sports account, you will receive up to $1,000 no danger first wager. That's right. When you place your first bet on Zen Sports, you can be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $1,000 maximum if the bet loses. And there's even more good news, people. Zen Sports is rolling out its brand new VIP reward program. This VIP reward program will allow top-tier customers to earn more bonuses, comps, and perks. Who doesn't like those three in combination? The VIP program is by invite only, okay? So if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for VIP consideration, please check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. No other sports book will offer you a premier sports betting experience with 24/7 top-tier customer support and faster withdrawals like Zen Sports. So, what are you waiting for? Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. Zen Sports, betting just got better. Gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
Make your silly underdog picks for your chance to win weekly prizes. You can play at thegamenashville.com or the 1025 The Game app as we approach week 13 of college football and week 12 of the NFL. Silly Underdog Picks is presented by Volunteer Hose and Gasket. D-Mase, we've got thoughts in the text line, so unless you have a thought.
Hey, let's go to the text line.
Let's get to the phones. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHonda.com. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you have a thought. One texter says, if you expected a good season, you were completely misinformed. You can't fix every problem in one draft or offseason. It's going to take a while in order to rebuild the O-line and the secondary and all the other woes the Titans have. It won't be fixed next year either. And I don't think it's going to be fixed next year. But the first part of the text is, if you expected a good season, you were completely misinformed. The Titans told us and showed us that they had every intention of being competitive this season. They wouldn't have held on to Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and Kevin Byard for the time being and brought in DeAndre Hopkins had they not at least wanted to make a push for the playoffs, to potentially win the division and get to the playoffs and then go from there. So the Titans told us that they had every intention of being good. They're just not.
No, they're not. And, you know, you're right from the standpoint of, you know, the texter. This is not things that are going to be fixed overnight. No. They're not. But what you can do is start to address a few of the problems, and you hope that, okay, if I address the tackle position, maybe the guard position or the center position in a later round, address wide. So you're sort of systematically trying to put this team back together from a roster standpoint, and coupled with the guys that you are going to retain here and guys you go and get in free agency, you hope that it meshes together where, yes, we haven't filled every, you know, need that we have, but we filled enough of them that we can now start to, you know, trend the right way, that we can start winning these close games that we're losing or win games away. Because right now, the roster isn't good. But if they add more guys this offseason, this can go from a bad roster to a okay roster, and then the next following season it goes from an okay roster to a much better roster. So it's just it's sort of this plan that they have to go through in order to build this roster back up, because we're not even talking about the free agents they may lose, that are going to other teams next year.
I always look at the Texans. The Texans were the worst team in one of the worst divisions, if not the worst division in football last year. Now they might make a push for the playoffs. Now, the Texans are looking like, hey, could this be the Texans division, not the Jags division? That's the difference between one off season. So no, you're not going to completely overhaul your entire roster in one off season, but there are changes that you can make and supplementary pieces to a roster that you can make that can turn you from, like you said, one of the worst teams in the league to, hey, a competitive team.
Exactly, a team that that is pushing for a playoff spot. We may not be there yet, or we may get in and get eliminated in the first round, but at least we're taking the steps. We're filling in the voids that are there, and hopefully the next following year we can upgrade at a couple of more positions that we need to upgrade. They have to build this roster back up, because right now this roster over the last 2 seasons is depleted of talent. It's bad. So they're gonna have to build this roster back up, and I believe they can do it, but it's gonna take a minute.
Another texter says, if you fire Mike Vrabel, then who do you hire? You only fire someone if someone else is better. It's okay for coaches to have down seasons. I would say if you move on from Mike Vrabel, if you trade him to New England, if you do decide to fire him, go find an offensive-minded head coach. I always say, coaching changes are kind of like presidential elections. You want what you didn't have before. So Mike Vrabel, very old school defensive-minded head coach, go find one of those offensive coaches that wear skinny jeans and have gel in their hair. The antithesis to Mike Vrabel, where go where the league is going, like a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay, a very offensive guru coach. And to the second point to that text that I have a thought on, it's okay for coaches to have down seasons. Yeah, it is. However, this is not just a down season. You're one of the worst teams in the league, and you really have no business being that bad.
And it's been that way for basically 2 seasons now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can understand, all right, you're having a down season because you got a rookie quarterback, or maybe you have a bunch of injuries to key positions. That's not the case for this team. They do have a rookie quarterback, but they were struggling with Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, so they didn't start the season with a rookie quarterback. They started the season with a veteran quarterback, and they were hoping they could finish with one, but obviously they can't. It's not about who do they go hire? Because, hell, I don't know who they need to go hire. That is up to, if indeed they were to make that move, that's up to Amy and Rand to figure out who they're going to hire. And best believe, if indeed they were thinking about or came to a place where Vrabel was going to be replaced, they have a long list of guys they would love to hire.
Yeah.
And they would send them through the whole process of bringing them in, interviewing them, and then ultimately, like every other team in the National Football League, you will find your coach. Now, you hope you find a coach that can at least give you, 4 to 5 winning seasons at least, and put you in a position to, not just make a playoff, but make a Super Bowl run. So it's not about, well, if you fire Mike, who you going to go hire? Well, didn't nobody say hire Mike Vrabel when you were getting ready to fire Mike Mularkey? You fire Mike Mularkey. I didn't hear fans say, "Oh, go get Vrabel. Please go get." No, because nobody knew Vrabel would be the coach that he ended up being for this period of time.
So I don't think that you can use that as almost like a fear tactic.
Exactly.
Of, well, nobody else is going to be better. I guarantee you there are coaches out there that might, I'm not going to say that they are going to win you a Super Bowl or going to get you to the playoffs next season, but could be a better fit for this football team. We'll chat with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game and The Game Nashville app. We are live from the Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Game Studios, and we're streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. Willy Donick now joins the fold. Willy, we are sending you our best all morning long, all show long. Glad to see you on here.
I'm glad to be here, guys. Sorry I'm late.
No apologies
necessary. A little bit of an eventful morning. Yeah, we're okay, though. Everything's good. Good. I'm glad to hear it. And perfect timing for Willy to join the fold for our friend Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. Tim, appreciate you for joining us. Tim, the Titans stink. There's no other way to go about it, but I want your perspective on where does this team go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's hard to disagree with your assessment.
That is my expert assessment.
Quick and direct as it is. And so where do you go? I mean, you try to, I think you try to develop young players. I think you give more opportunities to players that you think be a part of it going forward. I mean, I think that's, without saying it, that's something that you do. And then the other aspect of it is, you continue to put the face on that, like, look, we're competing every single week and we're putting the best guys out there for this Sunday to help us win. I mean, like, that's what you do, whether or not you really believe that or not, obviously can be discussed. But I think that, look, just with the way the division is looking, look, you're not out of it, but I think you certainly have put yourself in a terrible situation.
What have you made of Mike Vrabel's coaching job? Not just this season, but even going back all the way to the final 7 games of last year when the Titans went on their 7-game losing streak to end the 2022 season.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fallen apart. And, I've seen some people say, like, hey, does he even want to be here? Look at his body language, just look at how he is. And, the thing I would just say is that, like, losing beats you up. It just does. It's, it feels like a funeral every time you lose. And then all of a sudden you keep stringing losses and it feels even worse. So I would say that the job has not been good enough. You talk about kind of, the ending of last year, how this season has gone. I think that while sometimes you can say, but hey, this happened or an injury or these things, took place. While that's always true, you can also always look around the rest of the National Football League and say, well, hey, the Vikings, they have figured it out. And like that guy was in our building at the end of last year. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of blame that falls on, at his feet.
Look at the teams around the league, the teams that are not doing as well, Tim. And maybe being in the Nashville market sort of helps Mike Vrabel because we don't hear the same sentiment about the Chicago Bears or the Carolina Panthers, teams that are bad. We are pointing the finger at the head coach, the quarterback, everybody else. But it seems like here in Nashville, not necessarily the people inside of Nashville, but when you look at this team from the outside, it's always Mike's a good coach, but it's everybody else's problem. But they don't do that with the other teams that are also struggling. Why do you think that is?
Well, I definitely think just like national attention and temperature of what's getting talked about all the time, is different here than other places. And listen, I think this is the point you're making, but like they're ready to move on from Bill Belichick in New England. Like that was pretty quick fall from grace, it seems. Look, we've seen what Brandon Staley's been under. I mean, he's essentially defending his job. And, I think some of the other scenarios, whether it's Arizona or Carolina, Chicago, even, New York, like some of those teams, like you're talking about, first or second year head coaches. And so with that, I think there's probably some different patience, in terms of how you handle it. But I guess what I would say is I think that people are looking at the talent on the roster, and maybe that's not all fallen back on Vrabel. And I think that's maybe helped some, or injuries at the position. And so I think that helps. But I think he's under pressure for sure. And I think nationally, much like Brandon Staley or much like, Robert Saleh, I believe it's going to happen to in New York. I do think some of the attention is going to come on the head coach in the, underperforming nature of the football team.
Now, how long do you think it's going to take them, meaning the Tennessee Titans, to sort of build this roster back up? We had a texter text into us and said, well, this is a multiple year build for this team. And my thing is, yes, it is, but fans are going to want to see some fruit at the end of this labor next season. They're not going to give you until after next season, the seasons after that. No, they're going to want to see some fruits of your labor next season. So how long do you think it's going to take, or possibly can take, him to build this roster back up, even if he is the guy?
Yeah, here's what I would say. Unless you got quarterback totally right, which you don't really know yet, unless you get quarterback totally right, I mean, you're easily talking about something that'd take 3 years or longer, for sure. Now, if you get quarterback right, and then you start doing some other good things in draft and free agency, then I think you could see the fruits a year out. But those are some pretty big ifs. Like here'd be a good example. The Detroit Lions. They were not a good football team. They made a change. Dan Campbell comes in. They get Jared Goff. And honestly, it was not great at first with Jared Goff. There were even talks about him being benched. But eventually it turned, and Goff turned out to actually be the guy. And when he was the guy, now drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown and Hutchinson and, getting some stuff right in free agency. Now, before you know it, it's like, oh, shoot, they're a really good football team now. So, look, I think it takes time. It takes, in some cases, it takes a lot of time.
We're talking to Tim Hasselbeck from ESPN. Tim, along those lines, one of the ways that you get better quicker is to stockpile some of those picks. And you just mentioned the Lions. They did. They got a lot of picks, and it's starting to turn around for them. So what about the double-edged sword when you ask, do they have the quarterback? I'm looking at their remaining schedule. They're favored in this game on Sunday. They probably aren't going to be favored in a whole lot of games down the stretch. Would you like to see Will Levis find a way to get a few wins in there and have success? They're going to really struggle. And when you look at their offensive line, you're not looking forward to seeing what that looks like each week. But you know what I'm saying? You'd like to see Will Levis experience success so you feel good about where he's going.
Yeah, or you would like to see enough to say, you know what, I'm pretty comfortable. We'd like to go in another direction, right? So, and look, if you're picking in the top 5 or, possibly even higher than that, then yeah, I think that, let's just look at it as we sit right now, okay? The Patriots could easily find themselves in a situation where they're not winning anymore. So they could be in the quarterback market and picking early. The Jets at 4-6, they're making a move. Rodgers is there, clearly wants to play next year, probably not going to be in the mix. The Chargers are not going to be in the mix. The New York Giants have 3 wins. They will be in the mix. Chicago could be in the mix. Carolina will not be. And Arizona at 2-9, I think, is going to get better with Kyler being back. And so there's a pretty good chance that Arizona kind of plays themselves into a better record. Okay. So we're just talking about a few teams. And then the idea that, Justin Fields would end up somewhere else. So if you're asking me as I sit right now, what's the better thing to do? And I've talked to you guys a little bit about, some of the quarterbacks that, will be coming out in this year's draft. The better thing for the Titans in the long run is to be picking at the top of the draft.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of decisions to be made along those lines. Tom Brady came out and said there's a lot of mediocrity right now. I watch every week just like all of us do. The games are exciting for sure, but it does seem like defenses have really come around here, Tim. What are they doing to have so much success, particularly in the red zone?
Yeah, I think that I don't know. Listen, who am I to argue with Brady in terms of what he sees and all that stuff? But I don't know. I think there have always been these elements of, this isn't as good as it once was. Like there was this golden era of quarterbacks when it was Elway and Marino and Montana and Young and, all of that type of stuff. And if I were really going to say what to me is the biggest difference with offense right now, it would be the number of young or backup quarterbacks that are playing on top of, as much as it's a passing league, we now have quarterbacks running it more. But if you just were to look at it from a standpoint of the Giants are down to their third guy, Minnesota's playing somebody off the street, Green Bay is, breaking in a new quarterback. The Bears, are down the depth chart. New Orleans has done the same thing. Atlanta's been a disaster. Tampa is playing a retread. Carolina's got a rookie quarterback. Seattle's dealt with injuries. So have the Rams. So have the Arizona Cardinals. Never mind, similar thing has happened in New York and with the Jets, and Cleveland has done it, and Cincinnati has done it. Think about it. The Colts have done it. The Titans are doing it. I can't say I ever remember a year, Willie, when we're at week 10, 11, and it's if you're a team that has not had to play your backup, you can kind of count on one hand or so the other teams that can say that alongside you.
How would you assess the very top of the league right now, especially after the headliner last night between the Eagles and the Chiefs? I got a chance to watch a little bit of the 49ers. They look like they're back on track. So how would you see the top 3 or 4 teams in the league right now based on what you've seen?
I think San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Detroit are all right there. And not necessarily in that order, but I think that when you look at Detroit, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that Detroit, because of Philadelphia's schedule, they're going to have the Cowboys coming up and stuff like that. Detroit could end up with home field advantage throughout the playoffs. I think that would be a very, very big deal. So, that's how I see the top. But I probably think Philadelphia is the best. I think I probably would put San Francisco if Purdy's going to continue to play like he's playing, and then Detroit next. But depending on where those teams play, I might feel differently about it. And then when you look at the AFC, I think that Kansas City is still the team to beat by a lot. I think Baltimore's way of doing business and, how they seem to be improving and how good they are in defense, I think that puts them right there with them. And then I think Miami is slightly different where, some things I think do have to go well for Miami to be in the mix. But they can be a handful. We've seen them be a handful, but I would have them kind of a tier down from the other 2 teams. And then I don't really think, look, as good as the Texans have been and as Jacksonville's been, I don't really feel like there's a real threat coming out of the AFC South.
Now, with that being said, Tim, can or will the Achilles heel for the Kansas City Chiefs be their pass-catching group? Because you can't just rely so heavy on Travis Kelce. He even had some critical plays last night, drop passes, fumbles in the red zone. But it just seems like no matter what Mahomes do or does, that they're always against really good teams. They're fighting because they don't have that legitimate pass catcher outside of Travis Kelce.
Yeah, it definitely feels like, they have some guys that I think they wished would really step up and take over. And I think there have been games that you've seen moments out of them. But I think if we were to sit there and say, like, all right, well, like, who do they trust? Like, who do they really, really trust? Not even just in the passing game, but offensively in general. But, I think that when you look at it that way, Kelce, clearly they trust. He's that guy. I think that Jerick McKinnon has proved to be that guy. And I think Pacheco in his own right, because of what he does, feels that way. But, like, who's really, really reliable? Like, it's not Justin Watson. It's not Valdez-Scantling. Sky Moore, I think they wish would have come on more. Kadarius Toney, as explosive as he's been unreliable. And I think that is why, they, brought McCole Hardman back, because it was like, well, at least we're familiar with him and we kind of have a sense of what he can do. So I really think that, nobody has really stepped up. They've all had their moments, but nobody's really stepped up. And I think when you get against good teams in critical moments, much like the game last night, you need guys that you can 100% count on and deliver more often than not. And they just don't have it outside of Kelce.
That shouldn't have been a game last night, honestly. The score in Kansas City losing, Philadelphia shouldn't even been close. That should have been, at best for Philly, maybe one touchdown, but at worst for Kansas City, they should have had 2 more touchdowns on the board. That game wasn't close.
You try to
honestly.
take credit away from Kevin Byers' interception? Why are you doing that?
Don't bring it up, Tim.
See, there you go, Tim. If
there
it's not
go.
Kevin
Just
Byers,
stir in the pot.
It's A.J. Brown. We're trying to get away from that, okay?
I mean, hey, in all seriousness, I didn't look at social media or anything, but I'm sure that every Titans fan that I have on my feed had to be like, what in the world are we doing? What? How did this all happen, right? I mean, yeah, it's a crazy business. It's a crazy business. And, sometimes people get it right when they move on from players, and sometimes you get it wrong. And, yeah, that was something. And think about this. I was checking out, Byard a little bit just in the numbers in terms of impact since he's got there. And he caught a little heat initially, I thought, in Philadelphia. But, he also was playing, week of the trade. And he still had 8 tackles in each of the first 2 games he played in. And he had 5 last night and, a pick and some other plays as well. So I think they're going to realize, I think they're going to love him there. And that's going to be hard to see.
They love A.J. Brown there, too.
Yeah, I was just going to, honestly, Titans fans just need to be we're cheering for the Eagles. This is what we're doing. We like them, and we're just going to cheer for them.
Fly, Titans, fly is the new war cry here in Nashville. May as well be.
I mean, it's actually not a terrible idea. It's like D-Mase is the kind of guy, he fills out a bunch of brackets during March Madness. So it's they're a similar thing. You know what I mean? Just do that.
Just have 16 different winners, and sure enough, one of them is going to end up winning the whole thing. Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. Tim, always appreciate our sit-downs with you every single Tuesday. We'll chat with you next week.
Sounds good. See you guys.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours as well, Tim. All right, coming up next, we'll react to what Tim Hasselbeck had to say. Plus, how about those Nashville Predators? Probably the most exciting 35 seconds in the history of Nashville Predators of this franchise. We'll get into that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We are brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
Nashville, what's going on? All right, I need to tell you about Zen Sports, the new sports betting app exclusively in Tennessee. You've heard me speak on them for the last 2 or 3 months now, but I'm here to share with you some big news, some exciting news. Okay. Now, when you sign up for Zen Sports account, you will receive up to $1,000 no danger first wager. That's right. When you place your first bet in Zen Sports, you can be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $1,000 if the bet loses. And there's even more good news. Zen Sports is rolling out its brand new VIP reward program. This new VIP reward program will allow top-tier customers to earn more bonuses, comps, and perks. The VIP program is by invite only, people. So if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for VIP consideration, please check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. No other sportsbook will offer you a premier sports betting experience with 24/7 top-tier customer support and faster withdrawals like Zen Sports. So, what are you waiting for? Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. Zen Sports, betting just got better. Gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
So the puck put on the left wing side. Cleared out. McCarr goes back to get it. Fumbles with it. Puts it on the end wall. He wipes out. In front, Cole Smith. That one stopped. They score! They score! The Predators, they're jumping all over on the ice and on the bench. Incredibly, they have come back to take a 4-3 lead with 21.6 seconds to go.
It was a lot of fun to see the group show some joy. I mean, I think if you looked at the bench and you looked at the scrum after they scored, I mean, that for a coach, and I know as a player, there's no better feeling in the world than that. And for a coach, again, you're proud that they're enjoying each other, they're pulling for each other, and it was a really good win for us.
Predators take down the Colorado Avalanche 4-3 last night. After some late game heroics, Philip Forsberg and Yakov Trenin score 16 seconds apart to take down those big, bad Colorado Avalanche. Willie, I was getting nervous going into the third period because we've seen that with a Predators team that has looked good through the first two periods, have looked like, okay, they can take this game, even against good teams like the Colorado Avalanche, and then things just kind of unravel in the third period. But that was not the case last night. What a fun game. What a fun atmosphere in Bridgestone Arena. Were you and D-Mase just freaking out calling that game last night?
Yeah, D-Mase punched me in the ribs on both goals.
As he should.
As they went in.
Yeah.
As he should. Yeah, as he has in the past. It was definitely a dramatic game. It's one of those games, and I heard Andrew Burnett say this afterwards. He said, let's hope that's the kind of win that can catapult us into something even more. That's what you hope for with a game like that. And you hit the nail on the head, Caroline. It was another game where you're saying to yourself, they're hanging tough. With one of the better teams in the league, but they may have nothing to show for it again at the end of the game. But they turned the tables in the final minute, and I thought one of the most incredible stretches of hockey we've seen this season, and I would put it up there with anything we've seen. Philip Forsberg took a tripping penalty, and I wasn't even sure who tripped who. I was worried that Forsberg was going to go in the box with 6.5 minutes left, but they called it on Rantanen. Nashville goes in the power play, and from there until the time that Forsberg tied the game, there were no whistles, zero. Continuous play.
Was it 6 minutes?
Almost 6 minutes. He scored with 37 seconds left, and it was one barrage after the other, and you're thinking, are they gonna break through, or is Colorado going to just find a way, a team that knows how to win, and just get to the finish line with the 1-goal lead? But they finally broke through. And then once Forsberg scored, the shocking play was right after that, where McCarr, he had a little trouble. Pete made a great call there. He said he's fumbling with it. And then all of a sudden, I'm not sure what he tried to do. He wiped out on the back of the net, coughed up the puck, and then Nashville just pounced all over it and scored the goal. That was really incredible, something you don't see very often because everybody's thinking overtime once the Predators tied it up. But
right.
They got the 2 points in regulation.
Well, they continued to put the pressure on the Avalanche in that third period. I think they ended up having 14 shots to 6.
Correct.
With a team like, if you're going against a team like the Avalanche, who has the firepower that they do on the offensive end, you got to keep them on the defensive end of the ice, and that's what the Predators were able to do. And I think that ultimately led to them not only tying the game, but ultimately winning the game at the end.
Yes, and they've had some games, the Predators, where the game's right there in the third period, and they haven't gotten it done, and they haven't even gotten the game to overtime. Colorado, on the other side, has been a dominant third period team this year. So for Nashville to flip that around against a team as good as Colorado, I'm hoping that kind of brings the confidence level back up. I think everybody was a little concerned with the confidence of the group after they lost those 2 straight games at home where they had 2-goal leads and control of the game and then let it get away and had nothing to show for it. It's one thing to let it get away and you get to a shootout and you lose the shootout and you say, okay, at least we got a point. They didn't get that. So I think that was a good restorative period of time there, those 2 wins, where they did get over the top, make the winning plays. So let's see where they can take that. And they've got a chance to, against to redeem themselves against one of those teams that stole a game from them, and that's Calgary. Nashville had a 2-0 lead at one point late in the second period in that game, and they came away with nothing.
And while 2 consecutive wins are exciting, it doesn't, a great game on Saturday against Chicago and then again last night against the Colorado Avalanche, it doesn't completely turn the ship around. But is this maybe a preview of what is to come with that Andrew Brunette system, that relentless get after the puck if you don't have it, if you do have it, then keep it? Because one thing that we were talking about through that rough stretch for the Predators where they just simply couldn't seem to hold on to leads. They simply just couldn't seem to close. They couldn't even get a point in a game where I felt like they deserved 2, whereas maybe those are the woes of a new system. Sometimes, when you just have so much newness, it takes time to iron things out. I understand it's only 2 consecutive wins and there's a lot more work for this team to do, but last night they played with a certain toughness, physicality, tenacity, speed, that it seemed like everything all seemed to come together. Everything of this new system that Andrew Brunette wants to implement with the Nashville Predators, it all seemed to click last night. Do you think it's a preview of what's to come?
I think that's what they have to hope for. I think there's plenty of room to grow. Until they do it, they haven't done it. But I think you hit on one thing. You used some of those terms that I think were evident. They were getting the greasy goals. They were getting to the net. They were nasty. They were playing with a little more edge. I think sometimes when you change systems, this is maybe just me, but they want to play this up and down, fast break kind of game, and that doesn't mean that that's the only way you score on the odd man rushes and you get a breakaway and you make all these great highlight goals. I think you can still mix in the gritty goals as well. And I think that's where they found some offense here, is using the grit, getting to those rebounds, tipping the pucks on the way in, taking the goalie's vision away. And I think that's where they have to keep building. And
after all, that is Barry Trotz's approach to this team, the Predator way, getting back to that Predator culture. And that Barry Trotz Predator way was, doesn't matter if you've got a better roster than we do, which we saw last night. The Avalanche have one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. I mean, they are perennial Stanley Cup contenders. But the Barry Trotz way has been, we don't care if we're outmatched. We don't care if we're outmanned. We are going to physical you. We are going to out-tough you. And I thought that I saw those 2 identities kind of marry last night, between the tough, physical, gritty, underdog, chip on our shoulder, blue-collar, Predator way, the Barry Trotz kind of coach Predators, and that Andrew Brunette quick, up-tempo, speedy style of play.
I think that's the ideal thing, is the blend of that quick up-and-down game that's fun to watch, fun to play, where the skilled players feel like they've got a chance to put up big numbers and you can score some goals, but also that grit and toughness that you're talking about. I think you put all that together. I think this group they feel like they've got room to grow, right? Has UC Saros had a good season so far? Definitely not, right? So you feel like there's room to grow there if he can get into a groove. And I really think he's been a little bit snake bit to go with everything else. So it's great to get him a win in a game like that last night. And some of the young guys, we mentioned it yesterday, they sat Luke Evangelista. So where can he go from here? They're just starting to get Juuso Parssinen and Phil Tomasino involved in the game. I thought both of those guys played well last night. So there's a lot of opportunity for young guys to grow their game. And if they do, that could lead to more wins. I feel like the group thinks that they keep saying it, right? We've left points on the table. Our record should be better than it is right now. So there's still a lot of time left in the season to see what they are capable of.
What did you make of that decision? We weren't able to talk about this yesterday. What did you make about that decision to sit Evangelista yesterday, Willie?
I think it's consistent with what he's done with the other young players. He has sat Juuso Parssinen. He has sat Phil Tomasino, as you guys know, multiple times. He even sat Yakov Trenin, who's a little bit older. So I don't think it is anything directed right at Luke Evangelista, but I think the theme is, especially for a young player, if you're in some habits or you're in kind of a rut where you're not playing well, he thinks, Andrew Burnett does, that you hit the reset button, you take a game off, you regroup, you look at some film, just take a deep breath, and hopefully you'll be better the next time you go back in, rather than just keep going back in there and the same thing kind of happens. So I think and Andrew Burnett, I've asked him about this. He's a former player. He doesn't like the idea of a player feeling like if you make a mistake, you're coming out of the game, right? He goes, that's no way to play. I don't like a player playing with a looking over your shoulder kind of mentality is the term he used. So he's cognizant of that. But there is a standard that they're looking for, and he always asks what's best for the player here. And I think he thought this was the best thing for Luke Evangelista, to take a game off, regroup, and then let's see how he goes. I think you could argue it's working for Tomasino, right? Tomasino, you're seeing he's now making some gains here.
Willie, the next 5 of the next 6 games are at home, and I believe they even got this whole month, really, into November all the way up until the middle of December. They're going to have more home games than they do away games, but more importantly, these next 5 out of the next 6 are at home. Can this potentially be, or do you think last night's win coupled with the win this weekend, can you see this as a building block for this team where they can really sort of make some hay in their season within the next 5 or 6 games?
I think that's what they're all believing can be the case. And if you look at who they're playing, Calgary, St. Louis, Winnipeg, 3 teams right there that are above them in the standings. Opportunities to close the gap on those teams, and teams that, if they are going to be in the playoff mix, and they still have to prove over the long haul that they belong in that conversation because they've fallen behind here, but you have to have success against those kind of teams. And then you've got to really take advantage of teams below them in the standings, and that's where they slipped up earlier in this homestand against Arizona and Anaheim. 2 teams that I think that they, at the end of the game, they thought, hey, we're the better team here, but we lost the game. So it's one game at a time. But one of the things, too, Derek, to look at is they're basically playing every other day now for the next, 3 weeks when you look at it. I think I looked at it, it's a stretch of 12 games where it's play, day off, and so on. So let's hope you get in a rhythm there, but there's a lot of hockey coming up.
And, Willie, to your point about sitting some of the young guys, Evangelista, Tomasino, I have no problem with that. If a player, especially a young player, is not playing up to the standard of this team and what you expect of them, then you don't have the privilege of getting to wear this uniform on the ice tonight. And especially whenever you are building a team, whenever you are now transitioning into a youth focus, there has to be, and I don't like necessarily using the term like learning experience or punishment, because I don't think that's it necessarily what it is, that it's a punishment. It's just a, look, you're not doing what we need you to do, and it's the next man up. I have no problem with sitting a young guy because he's not giving what you need. Maybe it's the kick in the butt that they need. And if it's not received in a positive way, if it isn't the kick in the butt, all right, we need more from you and I'm going to give you more, then you can't be part of this team moving forward.
Yeah, and I don't think it's an old school, I'm going to sit your butt down and you're not going to play until you get it right.
I don't want to use the word punishment because I don't think it is a punishment.
Yeah, I think it's more of a mental rest, and let's see if we can get you back on track. But sometimes to do that, maybe you have to take a step back. I think that's the mentality they're trying to use, and hopefully all these young players are receptive to it. I give Tomasino credit, right? He was sat a bunch of games, and he could have squawked, and he could have had his agent say, trade him, whatever. There's a lot of things you can do with that. Tomasino's a first-round pick, but he dug in there. He was patient, and now let's hope he can keep building on it, because I think his last couple of games have been 2 of his better games for sure. So, again, let's see what happens. It's really not what you do for a week period, right? It's what you do over the long haul, week after week, month after month. That's the big picture that you're looking for. I think another guy, too, is Parsonen, who's starting to play a bigger role, hasn't scored in 10 games. But I think his game is starting to show signs of life, where you're starting to see him do the things that he does well.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. Coming up next, I want to go back and touch on something that we mentioned with Tim Hasselbeck, what we saw from a former Titan on Monday Night Football last night, and how it's just becoming a disturbing and frustrating and annoying trend. And we'll get into that coming up next, and of course, your thoughts as well. Join Jared Stillman, Chris Sanders, and D-Mase at Teddy's Tavern this Sunday from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. for our NFL pregame show. He'll break down the Titans' Week 12 matchup against the Panthers and give you the latest updates before the game. Our NFL pregame show is award-winning. NFL pregame show is presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment and Beast Unleashed. We all know how stressful moving can be, but I am here to tell you that it does not have to be. Caroline Fenton here for my friends over at Black Tie Moving. And at Black Tie Moving, their trained and dedicated team is there to ensure that they take the stress out of the moving process. I moved with Black Tie Moving over the summer, and trust me, I have been through it with some bad moving experiences in the past, but this was not the case. This was truly the easiest and most stress-free moving experience that I have ever had. It was top-notch customer service. I knew exactly what to expect from the very beginning of my move to the very end of my move, and the movers came right on time and had so much respect for my things, for myself, and my space. So give Black Tie Moving a call at 615-437-8401. That is 615-437-8401. Or you can visit them at blacktiemoving.com. Be sure to mention the promo code GAME, G-A-M-E, to score 10% off of your next move. And then sit back and enjoy the best move of your life, because it was the best move of my life when I moved with Black Tie Moving.
As the Chiefs head coach against his former team, the Eagles. First down, end zone, picked off, intercepted by Byard.
Ugh. How depressing it is to see former Titans go out and make plays the way they do. And if you thought A.J. Brown was enough, well, here comes Kevin Byard. Intercepted Patrick Mahomes, because of course he's going to intercept Patrick Mahomes. 8 tackles, 2 PBUs along with that interception. And look, it's not just Kevin Byard, and we talked about this with Tim Hasselbeck. It just seems like every time the Titans move on from a player, they go on and they continue to make plays for whatever team they go to next. Trade away A.J. Brown to the Philadelphia Eagles. They go to the Super Bowl, and A.J. Brown looks like a freaking MVP contender. Mm-hmm. David Long Jr., what was his problem? Couldn't stay healthy with the Titans. I don't think he's missed a game with the Dolphins. Mm-hmm. And he's been balling out with the Dolphins. And I know that happens a lot in the National Football League, where you move on from a player. Maybe they just need a change of pace. Maybe they just need a change of scenery. But man, this team could use a good defensive back. This team could use a good wide receiver. This team could use a good linebacker right now.
This team could use a lot.
This team could use a lot.
Yes.
Well, that's why they got draft picks, though.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Good for Kevin Byard. I'm rooting for him, but I'm glad that they made the trade. And I asked you guys this. Now, think about this hypothetically. Imagine that we either just skip the Falcons game altogether, or you flip-flop the Falcons game and one of the 2 debacles in Florida right before the All-Star, right before the trade deadline, rather. Because I think the timing of the trade deadline was interesting. They played a really fun game. They got a win against the Falcons. And all of the talk of, well, they traded Byard, who else are they going to trade? It stopped. Because they were 3-4, and they were like, well, you got the Steelers on Thursday. If you beat the Steelers, you're 4-4. If they had lost that game against the Falcons, or if it was Jacksonville who just crushed them in that game, like in hindsight, are you almost wishing they could have gone back and traded a couple more guys and gotten more draft picks?
Yes.
Possibly. And by the way, David Long Jr. hasn't missed a game. He has a total of 60 tackles.
Of course.
1 interception, 1 forced fumble, something like that.
Those muscles are a little bit looser in Miami.
Yes. It's a little bit warmer all year round.
Nice humidity. Good for him.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's what we were, even before the trade deadline, I think that's what we were looking at, the games right before the trade deadline. And, okay, if they win this, then what do we believe they will do when it comes to the trade deadline. If they don't win it, are they going to have a fire sale and try to trade guys that are on expiring contracts or have maybe a year left to try to get something for them? Well, they end up winning the Atlanta game, but they still chose to make a trade with Kevin Byard. And, what, they get 5th or 6th and another player. So I think they were looking at it as more than likely he won't be here next year.
So
get what you can
it.
for him. Not to say he couldn't play, but with him or without him, that defense still, they were who they were. They were not a good defensive unit. Had the potential to be, but they just, for the most part of the season, that potential didn't show up enough for an offense that was failing. So them choosing to move away from Kevin Byard, honestly, I think that maybe was a smart move for both the organization and for Kevin Byard. Do we believe had they lost that game, do they go, and try to trade more guys? I don't know.
And we don't know if they didn't try. I'm sure that they did.
Exactly.
I'm sure that Rand Carthon was working the phones about a Harold Landry or even a Derrick Henry. But it is, the point of it to me is, because you're not going to go back and re-get Kevin Byard. You're not going to go back and ask the Philadelphia Eagles for maybe a 2nd-round pick in addition to the 5th and the 6th because he had an interception against the Chiefs. It's just disheartening to see this continued trend of once players leave the Tennessee Titans, they do whatever the problem may be. What was it with A.J. Brown? Couldn't stay healthy. Could stay healthy in Philadelphia. David Long Jr., what was it with him? Couldn't stay healthy. He's been staying healthy in Miami. And a big part of the conversation whenever Kevin Byard was traded away was, well, he hasn't been playing to as high of a level as maybe he has in the past. Maybe he's declining. Last night he didn't look like he was declining.
No, I didn't, but I'm sure the Titans are not looking at it from the standpoint of, oh, my goodness, like you said, well, he had an interception in a game, so, man, maybe we shouldn't have traded him away. I think they're looking at big picture here, and, with the loss last week versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think that big picture comes into focus even more. Like, we need to go out and upgrade this roster seriously. Like, no, bargain shopping over here, no bargain shopping over there. We got to get some guys, impact guys. And the only way you can get impact guys is you need to pay the money through free agency, and you need to you need to make the right decisions when it comes to the draft.
And I think there's a laundry list of things they've got to do. But one of them is assessing what your budget is going to be for free agency and how much you're going to try to, go for it. Because when you go to free agency, it can help you, but you're getting guys that other teams have passed on. They're a little bit older and a little bit more of an injury risk, and you have to probably overpay to get the best guys. So that's a tough road to go down. But you also have to decide who's on your team, who you keeping, and who you letting go. And I think that's a really key thing for the last 7 games. Who's got a job next year for the Titans? Who's gone for sure? And who's kind of playing for a job next year?
And who's got a job next year? I think that's an incredibly short list.
That's a short list.
Yeah. Also, a quick note here. The Indianapolis Colts have waived linebacker Shaq Leonard. A little surprising, not the most surprising thing. We've seen his snap counts go down over the last few seasons. He's been dealing with injury. But I'm going to get ahead of this before we might hear it in the text line. Titans don't need Shaq Leonard.
Nah.
They can play the game of, hey, we're playing the Colts. Let's pick up Shaq Leonard.
Let's pick up
they can
Shaq
do that.
Leonard revenge game, perhaps. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get back into your phones, but coming up next, we'll chat with Mitch Light, who covers college football for The Athletic. Weird weekend in college football. Also, we've got rivalry week coming up this upcoming weekend and some big college football playoff rankings coming out tonight. So we'll break all that down with Mitch Light coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, and The Game Nashville app. We're live from the Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Game Studios, and you can tune into 102.5 and 106.3, The Game, this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. for our college football game of the week, Vanderbilt against Tennessee, presented by Twin Peaks. Take your tailgate to Twin Peaks for scenic views of all of the hottest college football games across the country and home of the 29-degree beer. Joining us now is Mitch Light, who covers college football for The Athletic. Mitch, always appreciate our weekly sit-downs with you. So Tennessee falls to Georgia, gets whooped by Georgia this past weekend. Now the ceiling for the Tennessee Volunteers, assuming they take care of business against Vanderbilt this weekend, which I'm not going to jump to conclusions with you two Vandegrads, but the ceiling for this team is 8-4. How do you think Tennessee fans should feel about this season?
Good question. Probably what we could have or what we should have expected before the season. Obviously fans of their own of any team usually have higher expectations than those from the outside looking in. With the loss that they had at the quarterback position and the wide receivers, and then when Brew McCoy going down, I think you could say 8-4 is probably a fair assessment. But I always say not all 8-4 records are created equally, and not all 7-5 or whatever. That's why you can't just slight tangent when they say, how many wins does a coach need to save his job? Well, again, you could go 7-5 and be really competitive, or go 7-5 and get blown out 5 times. So I think the troubling thing for Tennessee fans is losing to their rivals, losing to Florida, who turned out to be not very good, losing to Alabama, and then getting run off the field against Georgia, and then losing so handily to a Missouri team that, quite frankly, they think they are better than, as a program. And it is a better program, historically, no doubt about it. So I would say assuming they win this week, it's not the strongest 8-4. They didn't take care of business. They didn't assert themselves in big games. They won the games they're supposed to win for the most part, and were, alarmingly uncompetitive in their last 2 games.
Best win is what, against a Texas A&M team that fired their coach a few weeks later?
Yeah, or maybe at Kentucky, but probably A&M, the way that Kentucky's struggling a little bit. Hey, Virginia's playing some pretty good ball now, actually. That 49-13 win, but that
looks pretty good.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously Virginia is not very good. They were not very good earlier in the year, but just if Tennessee fans have not been paying attention, Virginia is playing much better as the season progresses.
If you're Josh Heupel, do you play Nico? I'm not even going to attempt to say the last name against Vanderbilt.
I don't start him. I mean, I would let Joe Milton finish the year there. I mean, you could argue that might not matter who starts in that game. Sure, get him in there, but I would not say, let's look to the future. I think you have such a long off season, and he has played some snaps. I don't think putting him in one game necessarily prepares him better for the off season. Now, the coach could be listening to this and say, that's dumb. Anytime you get the more action you get, the better. Yeah, I get that. Get him in some. But I don't see any reason not to start Joe Milton in this final home game.
Now, Mitch, do you think that game with Georgia and Tennessee, do you think that was a statement game for Georgia? Because there still was many that felt Georgia, they don't have the quarterback. The team's not the same. The quarterback isn't as good as what they've had the last 2 seasons. Let's just say that. They haven't really played anyone. But if you look at their schedule, they beat Kentucky, who then was ranked 20th. They beat them. They blew them out, 51-13. They beat Missouri, a good Missouri team. They beat a good Ole Miss team. They raked them through the cold. And then there was still this, we don't know about Georgia. But then they come back and they basically manhandles Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, Derek, I do think they made a statement. I think they are, Kirby Smart's master motivator, who's found a way in the latter half of the season to get his team ready to play every game. And I'm looking at their season right now. They have not given up more than 21 points in a game. That's pretty impressive. They gave 21 to UAB and then 21 to Missouri. Their last 2 games, beat Ole Miss 52-17. And, I know Tennessee's struggling on offense because that's a program that knows how to score some points. Basically give up, a 75-yard touchdown run on the first play of the game, and then nothing more is quite impressive. And I think this could matter. Now, you can make the argument that it doesn't matter because if they win the SEC championship, they could win every game by 1 point and they'd still make the playoff. But there are a lot of weird scenarios. Let's say they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Right now we can sit here and say, would they make it? Maybe not. But the more impressive they are in all of these games, that increases their chances. That improves their resume. So there's a lot of reasons why Kirby Smart wants his team to play well, and I give him credit because he's pushing the right buttons at the right time. They get Georgia Tech this week on the road. You'd expect they'd win that game, and then it's SEC championship game. So I'd be shocked if they don't make the college football playoff the way they're playing.
Now, speaking of the college football playoffs, the rankings come out again today. Do you see? And this is the first time that I got an opportunity to watch Washington play a whole game. I know the conditions were bad, which caused it to be a low-scoring game, but Penix showed me why he is a Heisman Trophy candidate. He stayed with the course, and he delivered some really good passes, tough passes toward the end of the game that put them in a position to win. But do you see them jumping over Florida State, considering Florida State lost their quarterback for the year?
That's a great debate, and one that we'll really find out more after if we see Florida State play the next few weeks without Jordan Travis. The one thing about the committee is we kind of treat it as one vote, and it ends up being one vote, but you got a lot of people in there with differing opinions. There's some coaches and people in there who say, well, you know what, we're not going to ding Florida State yet because we haven't seen them play a full game without their quarterback. Or there's someone who will be like, well, I'm going to ding them because they're clearly not the same team. It doesn't really matter now. We'll find, if they play well enough and win these two games with backup quarterback, Rodemaker, I think his name is, then they'll probably be in the playoff. But to your Washington point, looking at their schedule, they have been playing with fire, no doubt about it. They're not blowing teams out like they were earlier in the season, but they keep winning, and that's the name of the game. And I don't think, a lot of us, especially here in SEC country, we can't really appreciate how difficult it is to win in Corvallis. Oregon State is a very good team. They played very well at home. So I wouldn't look at that score and be like, 22-20, they're not playing well. And again, we're going to find out. If they're going to play Oregon in a couple of weeks probably, if they win that game, they'll make the college football playoff. If they don't, they won't, and these close wins won't really matter.
I second the motion. I got a chance to see that game too, guys, and it was a driving rain the entire game, but I got to give the Oregon State fans credit. They stood in there. Nobody left. They had the ponchos on, but they were there the
Beautiful
entire
weather
game. They went right down.
They love it.
Oh, yeah. I guess they're just like, whatever. This is what happens here, and this is a big game, so we're digging in. But that was a clutch road win for Washington. All right, Mitch, let's look at the big one. Michigan, Ohio State. Michigan looked kind of blah against Maryland. Had a little trouble there. It got a little hairy. So how do you look at the matchup here?
Yeah, fascinated by it for all the reasons. I mean, everyone can have a different opinion, and obviously, my dad went to the University of Alabama. I grew up an Alabama fan. Really appreciate the Alabama-Auburn rivalry, but I think I will always say that Michigan-Ohio State's the best rivalry in college football. Army-Navy's on a separate plane. That's a separate deal. I love that game, but I think Ohio State-Michigan's the best rivalry in college football. And the fact that it's been elevated the last few years because of Michigan's emergence and then now all the controversy this year, I can't wait to watch it. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see, J.J. McCarthy in this game. He's been just cruising along, hasn't really been under much pressure this year. Some early Heisman buzz there. Another side story, he grew up a huge Ohio State fan, was out of Philadelphia, I believe, was not recruited by Ohio State. Interestingly, the Penn State quarterback and the Michigan quarterback grew up Ohio State fans, weren't really recruited by either school, but that's a side story there. So all along I thought Michigan. But I think I'm going Ohio State. I can still change my mind later in the week. I think Ohio State's defense is undervalued. I don't think people realize, because they've struggled so much the last couple of years, that Jim Knowles and the second year's coordinator, they planned really well. You remember last year, it wasn't Michigan driving the ball up and down the field. It's the big plays in the running game mostly. And Ohio State's done a better job limiting those big plays. So, conversely, Ohio State's not nearly as explosive as they were last year. So it's not like you can just guarantee they're going to score 30 points. So I can't wait to watch the game. My prediction right now would be Ohio State, and I think it's their defense against Michigan's offense that really is lacking the big plays this year, or big plays in the passing game. could be the difference. But, obviously nothing would surprise me in this one.
Here's a question you may not know the answer to, but obviously,
you're not supposed to ask a question you don't know the answer to, Willie.
Right. But I am going to try to take a dig at Michigan because they have plenty of experience with what I'm about to ask you, and that is, what does Jim Harbaugh do during the game? What is he allowed to do? What's he supposed to be allowed to do? Because we're all wondering what kind of factor it's going to be with him not being on the sideline. But they've done this 5 times already this year.
Well, earlier in the year, when the weather was nice, I think he said he went to some of his son's games. I don't know what sport, and I don't know how old his kids are. I think he said he mowed the lawn and all this, but, I don't think it's lawn mowing weather up in Ann Arbor. My guess is he's going to be at home on the couch watching with his family if he can stand to watch. I'm sure that's would be nerve-wracking there, but he's not allowed in the complex or anything like that. I don't know what the deal is there, like with their football offices. I guess if they're not attached to the stadium, I don't know. Is he allowed at his football office? I don't know, but will not be there. And that will obviously be one of the key storylines of the game. Now, he doesn't call plays, so it's not as big of a deal at other schools with other head coaches there. But, we would be fun to have a Harbaugh cam sitting here watching him react to every play.
Well, I think based on his track record, they should have a Harbaugh cam just to make sure he's not texting people or, have some kind of interesting communication system.
I don't know.
What you saying, Willie?
He's a cheater.
I'm confused.
He's a cheater.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, Michigan doesn't have enough resources or buy-in, Willie. They have to cheat to try and remain competitive.
They don't have the millions upon millions of dollars.
They're just a rinky-dink little program trying to make it in this world. I mean, my goodness.
Exactly.
Now, Mitch, you said you've switched to Ohio State, but you do have the leeway to switch back if you so choose before the game. But did the second half of that Maryland game concern you? Because to me, whatever Maryland did in that second half, and I'm not going to even let Michigan off the hook and say, well, they probably was thinking about Ohio State. No, that Maryland team buckled down defensively. It made it very hard for JJ and for Corum running the football. I think he ended up with 94 yards, but that was a tough 94 yards for him.
Yes and no. I mean, I try not to read too much into any, one half of football. I didn't see that game, but I know what happened. I looked at the box score. I think sometimes, as you know, when you get a lead in the game and, then you kind of play close to the vest. I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Maryland had the ball a couple times with a chance to take the lead, but never really in position. That was at their own 20. So, you never really thought Michigan was going to lose that game. Of course, if you're a Michigan fan, you'd like to see them, take the lead, blow them out, no doubt about it. But, Maryland's a pretty good offensive team. Going to Maryland there, just escaping with the wins enough there. Never really got the impression that Michigan was in real danger in that game. But, it's kind of a thing. Michigan's put up some gaudy numbers this year, but they have not been, severely tested. The one game they played against the marquee defense, they did enough to win in Penn State, but I don't think you walked away from that game saying, wow, I've got confidence in this team that if it needs to drive the field to win a game, they can do it against the elite defense. And I think Ohio State's defense is every bit as good as Penn State's.
Mitch, over the weekend, it was announced by Arkansas's athletic director that they would retain Sam Pittman at least for another year. Now, I know a lot of Arkansas fans were not very pleased to hear that announcement. I think a lot of Arkansas fans were hoping that it was Jimbo Fisher 1, Zach Arnett 2, Sam Pittman 3. Obviously, Arkansas season did not go according to how they expected it to, but do you think that was the right decision to hold on to Sam Pittman for now?
From the outside looking in, I would say yes. But you always don't know. It's kind of dangerous for us that we don't know what's going on. Sam Pittman seems like the greatest guy in the world. Like everyone roots for him. But
really
we don't know
does.
Again, we don't want anyone to we want some people to get fired, but you know what I'm saying. We want good things to happen to Sam Pittman. But we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know what happened, with the coordinator. I know he got fired and all that. So I always hesitate to say teams should do this or shouldn't do this. What I believe to be the case, and I might have been David Ubben, one of our writers, was talking to some coaches. I heard him on a podcast saying, we can watch it with our own eyes. But the feeling around college football around the SEC is the talent level at Arkansas has really just dipped in the past few years. And you heard Sam Pittman at that press conference, and he was saying, this is killing recruiting. This just all this rumors, and they've had several decommitments so far this year. So if you're an athletic director, if you're Hunter Yurachek, you might look at it and say, you know what, Sam Pittman's done some good things here. He's a great guy. But talent level's down. We struggled this year. How many times when you give a guy an extra year do they turn it around? I mean, you'd have to go back and look, but usually when you're in this situation, it doesn't end well. So I wouldn't have been surprised if they would have pulled the plug there. But I guess my big picture look would be say, yes, I think Sam Pittman deserved another year.
Now there are.
All right. Sorry,
go
D-Mase.
ahead, go ahead, Willy.
Okay, because here's one. We got to have some fun with this because for years, Mitch. This goes back to when Chase was part of the show here, and Chase would always get after Mitch. Mitch, they're going to fire Jimbo Fisher. And Mitch would come back and say, do you know how much money they would owe Jimbo Fisher if they fired him? And here we are. So Chase was a year early, but here are the numbers. And Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong here. When they fired Jimbo Fisher, he immediately got a check for $27 million. $27 million. He gets another $12 million in 60 days. Just a little small check for $12 million in 60 days. Just
in case he blew through all the rest of it.
Yeah, just in case. And then $7.26 million for the next 5 years. That's a lot of money. Good God.
So are you trying to make me look bad, Willie? This is not a good. I'm a guest on your show. You're supposed to make me look smart, not make me look bad. No, you didn't need to bring that up. I mean, Chase, whatever. So Chase was right. Okay. Now, it's a staggering amount of money, and at some point you just look at the situation and you say it's not going to work. And I was completely wrong about Texas A&M this year. I thought they would be better. I liked bringing in Bobby Petrino. It hurt that Connor Wegman got hurt. Not that he was lighting it up, having this great year, but he's a really talented kid, and you would have liked to see him in that offense with all the talent they have there. But it clearly wasn't working, and there's very few schools, maybe A&M's the only one in the country, that can make that kind of financial commitment to pay a coach. Now, it's not necessarily.
Is that the biggest one ever? Is that the biggest buyout ever?
Yeah.
Gotta be, right?
Yeah. Gus Malzahn was the biggest one before that.
It was like 20.
20. So, no, this is like
shatters
a lot more than that. Yeah, shattering it. So, and we'll see what they have to pay the next coach. And, it's not, for the most part, it's not the university shelling out the money. It's the boosters, but it comes from the huge same pot of oil, so to speak. So
in this case, especially.
Yes. So it's a staggering amount of money, and it's a good gig. Being a fired SEC coach is a good gig if you can get it. And Jimbo Fisher is, I'm sure he's bummed he didn't win at Texas A&M, but we don't need to shed any tears for Jimbo.
Well, he's going to be bummed walking out the door with a lot of money in his pocket. You just mentioned the coaching in regards to A&M, and there are 3 teams here. I want you to give your assessment of and who you think can potentially be their next head coach. Syracuse just fired Dino Babers after, I think, 5 years, somewhere around there. Obviously, A&M and Michigan State, those 3 teams. Who do you think is the leading candidate, if there is any at this point in time for those 3 programs?
Yeah, I mean, this is just speculation, just what I've heard, read and heard and stuff. If they put me in charge of the search. I think Sean Lewis makes a lot of sense at Syracuse. He was the offensive coordinator there under Dino Babers, then went to become the head coach at Kent State, and then obviously we know what happened to him at Colorado. Goes to be Deion Sanders' offensive coordinator. You don't see that happen very often, the head coach leaving to become a coordinator, and then he gets demoted there, but he's still highly respected. So I think Sean Lewis makes a lot of sense there. I like Mike Elko for other opening jobs. I know he has no ties to Michigan State, but Duke has struggled a little bit late in the year, but we've seen what he's done with that program. Most of the struggles were due to the quarterback, Riley Leonard getting hurt there. So I think Mike Elko makes a lot of sense there. I thought Sean Lewis to Michigan State made sense earlier in the year when, the Colorado offense was rolling and stuff like that. Not that his recent struggles make him less of a coach there. I just don't know how attractive he would be to Michigan State at this point. Jamie Chadwell is a guy that came onto the scene at Coastal Carolina, and he goes. We all thought he's maybe earmarked for ticketed for a bigger job, a Power 5 job, and he never really got one. Then he goes to Liberty, and I think they're 10-0 or 10-0 or 11-0. Could he be a fit at Mississippi State? The one knock on Chadwell is you look at his resume. Not one season at a Power 5 school, even as a coordinator. It's or position coach. Never recruited at a Power 5 level. To me, that's not a huge red flag. I like going to his Wikipedia page and looking at his wins and losses, and the guy just wins a ton of games there. So I've heard his name at Mississippi State. I have no idea what the interest there is, but seems to be a pretty good candidate pool this year of head coaches.
Any other openings you think will happen as the college football season winds down?
UCLA was rumored, but after they had their really impressive win against USC, I think I would say Chip Kelly's in good shape there. I have at Arizona. I'm drawing a blank on his name. He's done a great job, former NFL assistant. But they are 7-3 right now. You guys remember the headlines a couple weeks ago about how Arizona is like $250 million in the hole from accounting issues. I've heard that he is not pleased with that. Obviously, I can understand that if you're the head coach there. I can't think of his name.
Jed Fish.
Yes, Jed Fish. Thank you very much. So not saying obviously he'd be fired, but he's one of those guys where I wouldn't be shocked if he made a move. Michigan State, I haven't heard that, but Fish has been all over the place. He's an assistant at Minnesota, I know, so he's been in the Big Ten there. So, off the top of my head, I can't, think of anything. Northwestern looked like it was going to be open, but they hired Braun, the interim coach there, and the ones that have made a move, like Syracuse. So, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. I'm probably missing one, but can't think of anything else.
Last one for you, Mitch, quickly. Did Lincoln Riley have the most disappointing coaching job this season?
I think that's fair. Based on what they did last year. I mean, their season ended poorly last year with the loss to Utah and the loss to Tulane, but they still had a good year. And they did a pretty good job in the portal bringing some defensive guys in, upgrading the talent. Like last year, their problem was lack of talent. This year, they were just bad on defense. But for them to lose they're going to finish 7-5. The last two games they won were Arizona in overtime and Cal 51-49 or 51-50, whatever it was, when Cal missed a 2-point conversion. They could have, this could have been a 5-7 team. And it's not often you get a quarterback like Caleb Williams. I mean, he is a generational talent. It's no doubt about it. One of the most disappointing jobs. I'd have to go back. I'd have to look around the landscape, Caroline. But I think over the last 5 years of college football, this USC team, with the talent they had on offense, to finish 7-5. Now, let's give the Pac-12 credit. It's a better Pac-12 than we're used to seeing. But hey, they went to Notre Dame and got run off the field by a good but not great Notre Dame team. So I'm right there with you. That was not a good job by Lincoln Riley this year.
Not a great job by Lincoln Riley at all. Mitch Light of The Athletic. Mitch, appreciate you as always. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. We'll chat with you soon.
All right, guys, take care.
All right, appreciate it. All right, coming up next, I will ask callers, texters, listeners, D-Mase, and Willy the question that I asked Mitch Light. How should Tennessee fans feel about the ceiling of an 8-4 season, assuming they beat Vanderbilt this weekend? We'll get into that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, we're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet. And also tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you guess correctly a Preds player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, then you will win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Predators home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexroad tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. Pick to Click brought to you by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty. List your home with TJ to get your home seen, heard, and sold.
Tell you about F&M Bank. A little change can go a long way, especially when you're trying to save some money. You've heard me talk about this before. Willie here for F&M Bank's Smart Swipe Roundup feature. If you haven't heard it, here's how it works. F&M's debit card Roundup Smart Swipe. It's a great tool that deposits change into your savings account every time you make a debit card purchase. So, if you make a purchase for $5.28, $5.96, whatever it is, it rounds up to the purchase to the nearest dollar. So you get that extra change, 72 cents, 50 cents, little by little, it all goes into your F&M savings account. So you build your savings every time you use your debit card. Great way to save money, and they do it easily. That's F&M Bank's motto, banking made easy on purpose. Stop by one of their branches or visit them online, myfmbank.com. They've got 20 locations in our listening area, myfmbank.com. Tell them you heard about it here on 102.5 The Game, because all of us know a little change can make all the difference. Member FDIC.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Bavarian Beer House, Nashville's only authentic German beer hall, is a place full of fun, food, music, and most importantly, beer. Enjoy traditional German bratwurst, schnitzel, giant pretzels, and more in an Oktoberfest-inspired space. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals now to get a $50 gift card for only $25 to Bavarian Beer House while supplies last. Appreciate college football writer for The Athletic, Mitch Light, for joining us in the last segment. And I asked Mitch the same question I've been asking myself, and the question I ask of you too, Willy and D-Mase. 8-4 is the ceiling for Tennessee right now, at least in the regular season, assuming they take care of business against Vanderbilt this weekend. How should Tennessee fans feel about that? Coming off of the magical 10-2 season, they were number one team in the country for a week, number one offense in the country, had a path to the CFP, which of course ultimately got spoiled by the South Carolina Gamecocks late in the season. But how should Tennessee fans feel about 8-4?
Well, I mean, you don't expect a fan base like Tennessee, regardless if they did have their struggles for a while there. If they're accepting 8-4 potentially, then they're not the fan base that many thought they are, or many think they are. I think they expected, especially coming off of last season, this offense, the way it was flourishing. I think the fan base said, let's just get the defense straight. We get the defense straight because the defense was their Achilles heel last year. They would put up a lot of points, but they also would give up a lot of points. So I'm sure the fans just get the defense right. I think they had their sort of apprehension of Milton, and I understand why. But they still thought that, hey, this team, I'm sure they looked at the Georgia game and the Alabama game as, again, those are going to be the two games. And there are some other hard contests in there, but those were going to be the two games that they were looking forward to, because to them, that will determine, their season and where they go. But this team hasn't performed to the standard I think Vol fans thought they would, from the quarterback to the offense at times, maybe even coaching, even though I think Heupel's a really good coach, and he shouldn't get all of the blame here. But their defense at times haven't been able to, do their part. So to me, if you are a Vol fan and you're okay with potentially being 8-4, to me, are you really a Vol fan then? And no, I'm speaking seriously, because you're coming off of a season that at one point you had the leader in the Heisman Trophy. At one point you were the number one team in the country. I understand, your quarterback gets hurt and it sort of derails your season, but you for more than half of the season, you were basically a top 5 team.
You were the team to beat.
Exactly. Everybody had to. If you wanted to win a national championship, an SEC championship at that point in time, you had to go through Tennessee. So if you're okay with 8-4 potentially, then are you really a Vol fan? Because I consider Heupel a really good coach.
He is.
His system is good as far as offensively. The defense has played better than they did last year, but they're still having that trouble at that one spot that they didn't have last year, and that's quarterback.
That's a really interesting point. Caroline, you remember I brought this up to you. I think it was while D-Mase was on vacation, but we got into expectations with Tennessee, and we set the bar at 9-3. And I think your argument was 9-3 would be a little disappointing after how well they did last year. And I was like, I don't know. If you're looking at Josh Heupel, you're still building. I think it was very premature to say that despite the season last year that they had, that they were ready to get to the playoffs, that kind of thing. It still takes more. And I think the what fooled everybody in hindsight was how well Milton played against Clemson in the bowl game. Yeah, and I think as we go forward here, those bowl games are not always a great indicator. It can be, but it's not quite the same as maybe it used to be. It's not a high-pressure situation, and I think it was clear that people maybe thought Joe Milton could be more than he was, and all of his flaws basically came in. And Mitch made a good point about the disappointment level. It's not just that they've lost the 4 games. It's how they've lost.
I think I'm blown
If they were
out.
if they were taking Georgia right to the wire at home, then you can live with that. And the same is true of some of the other games that they played. But it's the way that they went down, like at Florida, where they couldn't get out of their own way. They were shooting themselves in the foot, making some big mistakes. That's the frustrating part, I think, of 8-4. As Mitch said, you could be 8-4, but you could actually feel pretty good about how they played. You could be, 7-5, but if you got blown out the 5 times, right, that you feel that.
Right.
I think that Florida game, honestly.
That's the most disappointing of all of them.
Missouri is a good team.
But also, you could only muster up 7 points at Missouri.
Right.
Yeah.
They couldn't stay in the game. That was what was disappointing.
Missouri is a good team. Missouri is a much improved team. But also, that spread in that game, I think Tennessee was favored by like a point or 2, or maybe it was like a 1 or 2 point spread. Nobody expected that game to be a 30-point game. And I think that's the most disappointing thing here is for Tennessee, the 3 most important games on your schedule, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Right now, with the way that Georgia and Alabama have stockpiled talent and the way that those teams are playing, you can live with losing to Georgia and to Alabama, especially how early it is in Josh Heupel's tenure and how difficult it is to beat Alabama in back-to-back seasons. But losing at Florida against a Florida team that probably isn't even going to make a bowl game, that is disappointing. And not even just losing. It didn't even just come down to a missed field goal. You lost by double digits. You lost by 30 points at Missouri, albeit a good Missouri team. But your best win this season is what? At home against a Texas A&M team that just fired their coach against a backup quarterback? And I think the one thing that I think can give and should give Tennessee fans hope is the idea that you might have the guy. That quarterback that you were just talking about, D-Mase, probably the biggest difference between this season and last season is the quarterback. That maybe you have that young kid. You have the hope that Nico can turn into that quarterback of the future. But Josh Heupel needs to figure out what the heck they're doing away from home.
Yeah,
they look horrible away from home.
How do you guys feel about that? Because we've been hearing about this guy for 2 or 3 years, right, with all the NIL and all of the hype, and they have kept him sort of behind the scenes here. How do we know he is the guy? You use the term the guy. We'll find out soon enough here, but I would be careful if I'm Josh Heupel not to overpromise what you're going to see with him. Unless behind the scenes, he's just off the chart. But I would think if he were, would you have thought about putting him in there at some point?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think they hope he is. You have to hope that he is.
Of course.
I mean, you look at the history of these 5-star quarterbacks that have been lauded as, the next coming. Well, Jarek Garantano is one of them, too. Mm-hmm. And that's a name that I think makes Tennessee fans shudder just a little bit. But also Trevor Lawrence was one of those guys that was a 5-star recruited starting in middle school. So it's so hit or miss, and it's so difficult to evaluate a young quarterback when they're 17, 18 years old, what they'll be in the gauntlet of an SEC season when they're 20 and 21 years old. But I think there is at least hope. And Tennessee fans have hope that could be the breath of fresh air and the life in this offense and in this team that Hendon Hooker was last season.
Well, I think that Tennessee Vol fans should be disappointed in this. That in their 4 losses, they've given up over 100 points.
Yeah, that's bad.
In their 4 losses. You should be disappointed in your defense, who you thought was much improved. They played well against teams not named Alabama, Missouri, Georgia, and Florida. Those 4 games right there, those are on at least 3 of the 4 are on your schedule that you circle. Like, these are pivotal games within our conference or within our season. Even if you lose to them, you can't lose in the fashion that they did. They got blown out in each. The closest game was the Florida game. And there's no way Florida should have beat them.
And it was still a 13-point game.
Exactly. Every other game, they got basically ran out the building. That's what Vol fans, not only the record, but they should be disappointed in that, because for the most part, the first half of the season, we thought the defense was playing well. But then when they had to show up against Alabama, Missouri, and Georgia, you're talking about top 15 teams, they didn't show up.
Playing the way that they play away from Neyland Stadium, I think, is the biggest concern, because that's not a Hendon Hooker issue. I mean, Tennessee looked really bad away from home last year at South Carolina, last year at Georgia. I'll give them credit. Now, they ran LSU out of the building in Tiger Stadium, but that was a much different LSU team at that time than the LSU team that ultimately went on to win the SEC West. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the system. I don't know if it's the penalties, but away from Neyland Stadium, this Tennessee team looks more like a 5-7 team than they do an 8-4 team. But let's get one quick thought in here before we get into your phones coming up next. Nate is on the line with a thought on the Tennessee Vols. Phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHounded.com. What's up, Nate?
I think Willy's completely wrong. I think they've already overhyped them just by paying them all the money up front without stepping on the field. I mean, we don't know if he's going to be, much good or not, but even if he is, how satisfied will the Tennessee fan base be if they don't get a national championship or anything out of Nico because of all the money they've paid him?
I'm concerned in general for kids who will jump at the chance and who wouldn't to get offered a lot of money for NIL. And I don't know how much actual money they get compared to what we hear they get. I'm sure it's a lot, right? And, to me, if you got $10,000, that sounds like a ton for a college kid, but we're talking way, way more than that in a lot of cases. But the expectation level that goes with that, that's going to be a lot of pressure with that. There's no question about it. So I would be very concerned for all kids who are in those shoes, particularly the quarterbacks who are in the spotlight.
And I do wonder with NIL and massive deals like this, how much of it is incentive for what they expect them to be, and how much of it is we just have to give you this to be competitive in recruiting because you're going to get it somewhere else, so we'll go ahead and give it to you because we want you within our program. It's almost like free agency.
Yeah. And who's running the program at that point? If you've got all this money paid out to your guys, like how difficult does that make your job as a coach? I think it changes the job.
Let's get back into your phones on this coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106 for the game.
Happy Tuesday, man, out there. Listen, I need to tell you about Cool Springs MD. You hear the joy in my voice. It's there. Over the years, more men have started to seek help for hormone deficiencies and imbalances. And Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and his wife Daphne, along with that experienced staff, give men the treatment required to improve their quality of life. Cool Springs MD services have already helped many men of Brentwood, Nashville, and the surrounding areas in Tennessee with improving their immune systems, energy levels, cognitive functions, and more. They're there to connect you with the medical care you require to have a healthy and enriched life. So, there's no better time now to achieve a healthy lifestyle. Man, if you want the energy that I have, I wish I can bottle it up and give it to you, but I can do one even better. I can send you over to Cool Springs MD. So here, make the appointment with Dr. Jeffrey Lodge. The number is 615-486-3458. That's 615-486-3458. Or visit our website at coolspringsmd.com.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Let's wrap it up with some of your phones. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. Everything is on the table. The Predators and their exciting win over the Colorado Avalanche last night. The Tennessee Vols, how you as a Vol fan might feel about an 8-4 season. And, of course, the Tennessee Titans. CP texts in, says there's no difference between last year and this year for the Vols. They got lucky against Alabama, and that made them think that they were a top 5 team. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that CP is an Alabama fan, if I had to guess.
More than likely.
There very much so is a much larger difference between this year's Tennessee team and last year's Tennessee team than just beating versus not beating Alabama. I mean, just look at the numbers. Last year's Tennessee team, the defense wasn't very good, but the offense was so high-powered and so high-scoring that it didn't even matter. This year, this Tennessee team actually has a pretty solid defense. They have a really solid defensive front, and they can run the heck out of the football. They struggle passing the ball. So it's not just outcome versus Alabama. This team is almost unrecognizable. This is not a Josh Heupel type of team. They're winning games the way that Josh Heupel's never won games before.
This team last season only scored under 20 points once last season.
Georgia?
And that was the Georgia game where they lost 27-13. And I thought they had an opportunity to beat Georgia. They had drop passes, so they had their opportunity. I don't think it's the same old Vol team. I think that the team last year was a really good team. Even with a defense that struggled, they still managed to put up a bunch of points. That's what you have to do in college football when you don't have a defense. You got to be capable of putting up a bunch of points. And they were. It's different this year because they don't have the ability with the quarterback to put up as many points. If they had Hendon Hooker for another season, I would almost guarantee you that at some point in the season, probably all the way up till the Alabama or Georgia game, this would be a team that was ranked in the top 4 or 5 because of the quarterback. A lot of games was won last year because of the quarterback and his ability to put the team or find open guys. Joe Milton, same offense. Players are different. Same scheme. He just don't hit the open guy with the frequency that Hendon Hooker did last season.
Yeah, I think we have to appreciate just how good Hooker was.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, perfect fit, older guy. And there's a little bit of good fortune in there. I don't think they had any idea how good he could be. And to his credit, he was fantastic. The other thing that I mentioned before the season started that I believe to be true is Josh Heupel's tempo and system. I think when you go around the league a couple of times, it gets a little bit easier. You're not fearful of it. You're not looking around going, what do we do to stop this, etc. I think you get used to it, and it doesn't fool you as much. I made the reference of the 40 minutes of hell with Arkansas. When they came into the SEC with Nolan Richardson, they took the league by storm. They hadn't seen that kind of thing before. Rick Pitino and his pressing offense with Kentucky, same kind of thing. But once they go around the block a few times, you still get beat by them sometimes because they have great players, but not because of the system.
Like, one texter texts in and says, has anyone won a national championship with a gimmicky system like Josh Heupel's? It depends on what you qualify as gimmicky, because I think that at one point in time in college football, maybe 2012, 13, 14, maybe even 15, the up-tempo, high-powered, spread it out, not quite air raid, but more so the offense that we're more accustomed to seeing in the college game now, that could have been considered gimmicky. Now, that's just offense. That's just how teams play.
I don't think Josh Heupel's system is gimmicky. I don't. I think they just run it different. Every team just about in college football runs 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, and they try to spread you out just so they can figure out what the defense is playing. I think the only reason it may not work for some teams is because they don't have a defense that can get critical stops in the end. Alabama can run this same system. Georgia can run this same system and put up a bunch of points. But you know what they have that a lot of teams don't? They got a defense that can get at least 2 or 3 critical stops. Ohio State, Michigan. They can run this same system. Why? Because they got the defense that could get them critical stops. When you want to run a system like this, which I don't believe is gimmicky, but you know you're going to score very fast, you got to be able to stop teams from scoring at least 2 or 3 times.
And I think for Tennessee to win a championship. Now, if you ask me, do you think Josh Heupel will win a championship at Tennessee? I tend to lean no. But the difference is going to have to be recruiting the best players in the country. That's the difference between Alabama and Georgia. Doesn't matter what the system is. They're just better than you. They've got more 5-stars than you. They're tougher at the line of scrimmage than you. Tennessee was able to find a good bit of success last year without a roster riddled with 5-stars.
It can all come together. I believe Josh Heupel can win a national championship at the UT program, but he has to have it all come together. If the offense is explosive, the defense has to bring something to the table. It's been flip-flopped every other year. Last year they had an awesome offense. Defense wasn't good. This year their defense is better, but their offense is nowhere near what they were last year.
That is going to do it for us today. We will be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Stillman and Company is up next.
Be love and love on your people. Peace.